guys, welcome back to Days of Darkness and welcome to my review of Hellraiser. This one came out in 2022. It is starring Odessa Asian, apologies if I mispronounced that, Jamie Clayton and Drew Starkey, and was directed by David Bruckner. Man, oh man, so I consider myself to be a novice Hellraiser fan. I'm a massive fan of the first two. I think they're some of the best horror films ever put to screen. But beyond that, and part of it is, hearing all the things about how the Hellraiser franchise just gets fucking terrible after a while. Not everyone shares that opinion, but for the most part, a lot of people tell me, like, oh yeah, it's just watch 1 and 2, maybe 3, and then kind of fuck off. I watched 3, and I wasn't very impressed. If anyone has seen that review that I did for Hellraiser 3, Hell on Earth, watched it, did a review, and for anyone who watched it, wasn't super impressed. Didn't really like it, and I haven't felt the need to explore any further than that. So I have not seen all the Hellraiser movies, and I can compare this one to only those first 3. And I gotta say, man, I was curious to see how this one stacked up. I was seeing all of these rumors and speculation leading up to the release of the movie. Of course, we get the news that it's going to be on Hulu exclusively, and then people are like, oh my god. I wasn't nearly as afraid for this one as I was for Prey, because Prey ended up being fucking awesome in my opinion. Very, very little gripe about that movie, so when I saw that this was going to be released on Hulu, didn't really break the deal for me, But, we started getting confirmations. I am adjusting super heavy. 1 second. We started getting news about Pinhead being a female, which I never had a fucking issue with. I don't understand why the fuck people do. Pinhead's a lady in this one, man. I don't know what you want me to say. There's nothing wrong with it. People were all outraged. Oh, it's woke agenda shit. And then the news got out that she was trans. And then it's like, oh my god. Then they really went fucking crazy. I'm like, dude, just fuck off. Like, I'm at the point now, and we'll make this rant very, very brief. I'm at the point now with people where, and not just in movies, in culture in general, if you can't get with the fucking times, dude, get the fuck out. Just stop. Go crawl in your little fucking hole, and that's where I'll leave that. But, we got the news of Pinhead being a woman in this, and I never really had a problem with that. You look at Hellbound, or the Hellbound Heart, I should say, and the fact that, Pinhead and all the Cenobites, if I'm not mistaken, are meant to be androgynous, gender-neutral creatures. They're not really meant to file under a male or female basis. And yeah, man, so I had no problem with it. I saw, the news that this was going to be a completely different story. This was going to have nothing to do with any of the original movies. This was going to be, so then people were like, oh, okay, is it a remake? Is it a reboot? Is it a reimagining? What the fuck ever. And, I was just optimistic, because I was seeing some trailers and shit like that, and I got to see what the Cenobites looked like early, and I'm like, ooh, this could be fucking rad. And sure enough, man, I popped it on Hulu the day after it came out, and fucking A, man. I really, 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 really liked this movie, dude. It was fucking rad, man. It was so fucking cool. I love the fact that, yes, this has nothing to do with the original movies. This is a completely new story, completely new characters. Besides Pinhead, completely new Cenobites, and the Shatterer is in this as well, which I always love seeing him. But even the Cenobites themselves, they are reimagined. They look completely different, and I fucking really dug it, man. I really, really liked it. This movie is brutal as fuck. They did a really good job balancing the familiar, but with everything that's familiar to a Hellraiser fan, even a novice one like me, they put their own spin on it, and they make it something different. I really, really admire these guys who made this movie for doing that, because shit, man, it was just cool. This whole movie was really, really solid. The opening, I think, really sets the tone. This is spoiler filled, by the way, if you haven't seen the movie yet. You know, it's been long enough to where I feel like a lot of people have seen it, but if you haven't, for whatever reason, pause it, go watch the movie, come on back. But yeah, man, so I fucking really, really like the fact that this opening establishes what this new Hellraiser is going to be very quickly, and in a very subtle way. We get Joey, who's walking around this very debaucherous mansion party. A lot of sex, a lot of drugs, a little bit of rock and roll. Overall, the exact sort of thing that the Hellraiser films are based around. Not sex, drugs, and rock and roll explicitly, but they're all based around sin, and they're all based around having very carnal desires and what lengths people will go to fulfill those desires. And we get that story beat with Voight, who Joey runs into as he's wandering around. And I love, he picks up the lament configuration, the puzzle box that does make a return here. It's kind of vital to have it. You can't really have a Hellraiser movie without it. But, he picks up that puzzle box, and I love the shot, because it's not a box necessarily. I love this shot where it's like you just look at it from this angle, and it looks like the traditional box. But then you pan, and it's just this, like, almost pillar type thing. I absolutely adored it. Really love that shot. And then he picks it up, and Voight catches him, and he's like all nervous. And he's like, "No, please, go ahead." And he's just fucking around with it. And sure enough, the fucking thing springs out and cuts him. It actually doesn't cut him. This spike just comes right out, pierces his hand, gives him a little stigmata action. And yeah, man, he fucking pulls it out. His hand's bleeding like a motherfucker. It's pretty grody. But not as grody as what is about to happen to him. And Voight's kind of just, watching, and you can clearly see, like, okay, yeah, this motherfucker knows what's going on. And he traps Joey in there. These chains start flying out and, piercing him. We get the one, like, it looks like it went behind his knee, and the fucking hook came out through his kneecap. And it's like, oh my God! It's like, fuck. The blood and gore, it's not a complete splatterfest, but when it wants to be brutal, it's fucking brutal. But we'll get into that side of things with Kill the Film. But yeah, man, so Joey, I love the shot of, Voight essentially, asking to seek audience with the Cenobites and yada, 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 and he's doing this, and the storm clouds and all that shit, and you just see poor Joey in the back being just obliterated by these chains. Absolutely brutal opening. I fucking really liked it. And it really sets the tone, especially with the look of the puzzle box. It's like, hey, you're going to get your Hellraiser action, but it's going to be a little different, which I really thought that that opening conveyed that very well. And then we get into our main story, and we are introduced to Riley and her brother and all of her friends. Now, I will say this. I feel like every performance in this is really fucking good to solid. Solid, well done, did your job, good job. There's no bad performances here. There's no lackluster or anything like that. On the writing side of things, I'm not going to call this a flaw or a bad part of the film, because really, honestly, there's only so much you can give to all of these characters. You're going to have characters that really aren't given a whole lot. People will always say, it's a common critique I hear with horror all the time, is, these characters are just here to get killed, yada, yada, yada. And it's like, you can only give so many characters so much, but yeah, I feel like everyone here does a really good job. There are characters that are just kind of there to be there. They're friends, but I really feel like, as far as the protagonist side of things are concerned, love the story between Matt and Riley, a brother and sister relationship. And they are both at extreme odds, to say the least. Riley is a recovering addict, and I really like how they played the story between her and Matt, because with addiction, if you see someone who is struggling with addiction and they have been struggling with it for a very long time, it gets hard. It gets extremely fucking hard because you love this person so much, but you're also frustrated by their decision making. And Riley is obviously young. She's Matt's younger sister, so her decision making may not be the best in the world. And there's so many different factors that can play into it, but I feel like they fucking nailed that dynamic between those two characters, especially in that one scene. She's coerced by her boyfriend, who is also a recovering addict, to go and steal the lament configuration. She comes back, and she's obviously a little fucked up. She's been drinking. She's relapsed. And yeah, man, that scene of her and Matt arguing, to me, in this horror film where we come and we expect blood and guts, and we get that for sure. But I really, really admire this film for going the extra mile. As, you know, the other two Hellraiser movies that I've enjoyed. The other ones, but I really admire this film for going the extra mile and really making you care about these characters. So when Riley is kicked out, she ends up wandering to the park, pops a couple pills, and plays with the lament configuration. It gets triggered. I can't talk. It gets triggered. It fucking springs a little spike, but it doesn't cut her. Then Matt comes to help her out. He accidentally pierces himself on it, and then right there, I love the fact that this film does a very good job of foreshadowing things. You know, it's not explained explicitly that the lament configuration cutting you is what brings the Cenobites. You know, that's not immediately explained until later on in the film. But, you know, with Joey, it just pierces them and then they come and you're like, oh my God. But when it happens to Matt, the way it is portrayed, you kind of already realize that he's fucked. And you're like, oh. But, you know, you don't know why. And I love the fact that they kind of go out of their way to, just the way it was filmed and the shots and all that. You know, you can kind of tell, oh, something just happened. Even though it's just a little cut on his hand. You're like, oh my God. Sure enough, he ends up going to the bathroom to clean it off. He's like, all right, just stay here. And Matt gets completely obliterated by the Cenobites. Really good stuff there. I do have a little critique about it, and it's more of a self-indulgent critique more than anything, but we'll get into that later on. Mainly, it's that it's pretty bloodless, which I don't like. I wish they, you know, to me, a Hellraiser kill should never be, you know, we need to get a little bit. I'm not saying I need to see his fucking head get ripped apart or anything like that, but we need something. Give me something, you know? Which we do get a little later on, but anyways, and then Riley obviously comes in. She's like, where the fuck is my brother? And that kind of springs us into our story of her trying to find out how to get her brother back. What the fuck happened to her brother? What is with his puzzle box? And we get all of that from there. And the story plays out very well. Obviously, her and her brother go and talk to an old assistant of Voight, who is now in a nursing home. She's dying. Get some good stuff there. But again, a pretty bloodless kill at the end of the day. But, you know, this woman tries to take the lament configuration from Riley. Riley doesn't want to give it up purely because she wants to keep it to figure out what happened to her brother, you know? But the assistant gets fucking poked and, you know, and then it's pretty much established, okay, if you get cut by this thing, you're fucked. I like that they take their time to actually explain that instead of just right out of the gate, you know. It's not like Voight said, oh, you've drawn blood, now they're coming, or anything like that. It takes its time with that little plot element. And again, that's not a thing in the original Hellraiser movies. It's just, if you solve the puzzle, here they come, motherfucker. Sorry, but again, they play around with it, and they do their own thing without disrespecting lore. Really enjoy that stuff, man. I gotta talk about these Cenobites, man. These fucking Cenobites, dude. Really, really like them. I will say I do prefer the look of the original Cenobites. I'm not gonna lie. You know, it's a take and give. You know, I don't hate the look of these guys by any means. It's just that I like my leather bound, bloodied up Cenobites. You know, these guys. It's very clear, and especially we see what happens with Voight at the end of this movie, so we see how they're made. Their clothing and their garb is made out of their skin, which is fucking just brutal. And honestly, it kind of does, you know... The original Cenobites are much more BDSM based, you know? They're all leather clad and... you know, the chains and the hooks, and it has a very sex oriented feel to everything, you know. They view pain as pleasure. And these guys do too, but they're just like, hey, we're gonna make clothes out of our own skin. It's like, oh my god. Fucking rad, though. I love the decision to do that. While I don't prefer it, I do like that. And speaking of the Cenobites, we do get some new ones here. We get, I know they all have nicknames. I think one's called, like, Gasp, or the Gasper, or something, and that's the lady who has, like, a skin hat that is held up by, like wire and shit, and it's, like... But she looks really fucking cool. She actually has a pretty notable scene where she pulls a pin out of one of the other Cenobites, who kind of looks like a frog. That one, I will say that one didn't really work for me too much. It just looks kind of goofy, but I mean, hey, it is what it is. Love the Cenobite that has the skin stretched across the face, and he's kind of like bound. Really, really grody shit with that one, man. And he's just like, that's all the sound he makes. It's very fucking eerie and creepy and awesome. But we do get some classic ones. I do miss Butterball. I will say I miss the Butterball Cenobite. But we do get the Chatterer, who has a much darker tone this time around, but he's still, you know, which I feel like he's always doing it in this one, like, no matter what. He's just... which leads to some unintentional comedy for my taste. I do love him, like, coming out of the ground, and he's just already, like... but looks absolutely fucking killer. There is a shot of one of the friends who's bound up. And, you know, the Chatterer's, like, just torturing her, and you see blood kind of pitter-pattering onto his gums and his teeth, and it's like, oh my god, it's so fucking brutal. But the Chatterer is really well done in this. I am sad that he does get killed off in this movie, but really, really good stuff from him. And then, finally, we have the star of the show, who I discussed a little bit in the beginning, but I, of course, played into the negative response and all that bullshit. That you're gonna get no matter what. It's the fucking internet. But Jamie Clayton's Pinhead. How does it stack up to Doug Bradley? How does it stack up to the other Pinheads? How does it stack up to the cameo bootleg Cenobite in Cabin in the Woods? I'm kidding. Shout out to Cabin in the Woods, though. It's a good movie. But yeah, man. Jamie Clayton's Pinhead. Awesome. Awesome. I have zero complaints. Honest to God. Like, and that's not me blowing smoke. That's not me trying to gain favor with the internet or anything like that. If I didn't like it, I'd just say I didn't like it. Awesome stuff, dude. Like, you know, there's not a whole lot you can do different with the Pinhead character and still, you know, retain that original feeling of that original character that Doug Bradley played. But again, you know, they play around with it, and they make it their own. Obviously, this Hell Priest retains the same features. Obviously, she has the grid pattern on her head and her face and all the pins sticking out. But it all lies in everything else beyond that. She is not leather-clad. She, like the other Cenobites, has very skin-made clothes from her own skin. Her she has this skirt, this very, like, I'm just going to call it a dress. It's always a dress. It's like a skin flat dress, and I love the little detail of her having these two discs, these two golden, like, lock-looking things on her neck, one on the back. Overall, just looks fucking killer. The eyes, she has these very blacked out with the blue iris eyes. Awesome stuff. But it all comes to the performance, you know. The look could be awesome, but if the actor or actress behind the makeup isn't delivering, then what the fuck? Jamie Clayton fucking nails it, dude. I think she is absolutely fucking great in this role. That first kill where we really, I mean, obviously we get her in little spurts in the beginning, in the first act, and yada, 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 but we really get her for the first time, and one of the first things she says, you know, this woman is praying to God, and and just all this stuff. She's like, hey, hallowed be thy name, yada, yada. And she just slowly approaches her, and she's like, what is it that you pray for? And I'm like, oh, she's got it. She's fucking got it. And yeah, man, I think she's fucking great. I really, really loved her performance in this. I can't talk fondly enough. If you're gonna ask me to, like, oh, well, do you prefer it over Doug Bradley's? That's apples to oranges, man. Like, they're two completely different performers. Obviously, I'll always hold that original Doug Bradley performance in high regard, but I'm gonna hold this one in a very high regard as well, because I really, really think she does awesome in this. And if they do decide to move forward with this story and make another one, I really, really am excited to see her back, because I fucking loved this character. Moving on. So, you know, Riley's search for what happened to her brother does end up leading her to Voight's mansion, where her friends follow her, and leads to all sorts of fun little antics, to say the least. I loved when her one friend who has an English accent, didn't get her name, sorry, but when she heads into in the walls, which I forget what the fuck she was doing in there, but she's in this guy's walls, and she's kind of looking around, and then we see, honestly, one of the creepier shots. You know, we get who we end up discovering is Voight, and he comes and he stabs her in the back with the puzzle box, which he got a hold of at some point. But he gets her right in the back with it, and she you know, she ends up running away with the puzzle box still in her back, sticking out of her back. And as we get this shot of this guy just in the shadows, and he's like kind of shuffling towards her. He has to use the railings on the inner wall for support, but he's like shuffling towards her. Creepy fucking shot, man. Super fucking creepy shot. Yeah, she ends up getting out, and loved the scene of her in the van, and we'll get into that later on, but man, what a fucking great scene. But that great scene does end up leading to her death, and then they try to go back to the mansion, and while heading over there, Riley is confronted by Pinhead, who says, hey, you know, we need 2 more souls, and we will grant you, I guess you can call it a gift. But if we don't get those 2 souls, we're taking yours. So, it's up to you, dude. And Voight is attempting to do the same thing for 2 completely different reasons. Voight, as we eventually discover, is working with Trevor. Trevor is working with Voight, basically to bring him new sacrifices, and as Voight states it, to feed the box, which I love the way he puts that. I think that is written so well. You have to feed the box and give it more so I can, you know, get this fucking thing out of my chest. Absolutely. I will say that as far as practical effects are concerned, obviously the Cenobites look great and everything, but that thing that is just sticking out of Voight's chest, it's this big gold fucking it looks like a space heater or something. I don't even know what the fuck to like call it. It just this big fucking thing, and it's sticking through his chest, so it's coming out of his back. And as he explains it at some point in the movie, towards the end, this thing is pulling, because you can see these gears turning, and there's these red like strands that are being pulled throughout this machine. And it's his nerves, dude. His nerves are just being constantly poked and prodded to the point where it's just to the point where he can never grow numb of it. And so it's just constantly, he wanted sensation. He wanted pleasure. And so they're like, I mean, we have this, they stick this thing in his chest. Absolutely fucking brutal. So all he is trying to do is get this thing out of his fucking chest. So we have two characters who are essentially trying to figure out how to appease the Cenobites for very different reasons. Riley obviously wants to bring back her brother. And yeah, man, really love that added detail of if you give these guys enough souls, they will give you something in return, whatever you desire. But, be careful, because in Voight's case, it might not necessarily be what you think it's going to be. But I love that little added detail to this one. Love the reveal of Trevor working with Voight, as I mentioned before. On this rewatch, it all stacks up really well. And you can tell that Trevor is trying to manipulate the situation in order to get Voight more bodies. Which, upon this rewatch, I really think they handled that well. It wasn't too evident. There's no point where you think that this is going to happen. I think it's really well done. Stuff like that can be really cheesy at times, but I really enjoyed how this was done. But let's get into the ending of this, dude. We're in danger of going in plot rundown territory. It's not nearly as bad as it used to be, though. But anyways, man, so we eventually get there, at one point, unfortunately, Chatter does meet his demise in this movie. Riley's able to stab him with the lament configuration, and she discovers that she can use the Cenobites as sacrifices. So their plan is to lure another one into the mansion where the Cenobites cannot get into or use their powers. Or I will say that was kind of muddy, because they definitely can use their powers in there. I really didn't get it all too much, I'll be honest, but that's just me. But hey, so they lure one of them in, and it's the one who's all bound up and his skin is stretched across his face and just all this crazy shit. But he ends up getting loose. She is able to trap him in the door. And then as we get the reveal of Trevor being behind, or being Voight's assistant, basically, and all of this madness. And Voight just needs one more, and he stabs Colin. Now, I will say this. Colin should be dead. He does survive this movie. Colin should be fucking dead. When Voight stabs him, he stabs him in the chest. I think he goes down. But he stabs him right directly in the middle of the chest. And just rips down to like here. Which, first of all, you're going through the sternum and shit like that. That has to, that's a breastplate, dude. That gotta be a pretty serious fucking blade. Of course, it's an otherworldly blade, so who knows. But he jams this thing down him. He should be fucking dead. Way quicker, which I did think he was gonna die at one point, but he should have been dead way quicker than that. He basically doesn't gut him, but he mutilates that fucker. He should be done. But anyways, so the Cenobites are coming for Colin, but she is able to, she ends up, obviously she's like, all right, well, fuck this Trevor guy. He's a fucking prick. So she ends up giving him the old, not obviously, but the lament configuration has now transformed to its final form, and it's in that spike, which looks very familiar to what we get in Hellbound Hellraiser 2, or the Leviathan, as it's called then. I think it's called the Leviathan configuration, actually, when it's in that stage, so, hey, It all adds up, right? Anyway, she stabs fucking Trevor with that thing. Really brutal shot too, and she takes it out, and it's like there's just this hole in his shirt. It's like ooh. But then I love the Cenobite, who didn't really get a good kill earlier on with Voight's assistant. She just kind of puts a pin in her mouth, and we're just led to wonder what happened to her. But she makes up for it here, man, because when Riley stabs Trevor, now he's marked and not Colin anymore, so she looks at him, and she doesn't use like chains. She uses these like wires, like these metal wires. And we get to see him used a little bit with Colin, where they're all wrapped around and they're squeezing on his skin, and it's like, oh. But we see it used to its complete potential with Trevor. Obviously, Trevor's laying down because he's just been gutted by this fucking puzzle box. And she ends up wrapping one around his throat and one around his arm. And he's doing this. And one wraps around his arm like this. And we see his arm get flayed. Just the skin peels off like fucking lunch meat. I'm like, oh! The muscles all sticking out and shit. And then as the camera pans away, we see one go across his mouth and one across his eyes and on his legs. And he's just getting fucked, dude. This dude is getting completely eviscerated by these fucking wires. Absolutely fucking brutal. I got really enthusiastic, but Voight is able to, obviously then, Voight has given them what they want, as well as Riley. So they both have held up their end of the bargain. So Voight is like, all right, get this shit out of me right now. They do. Great shot of that machine just falling apart and falling out of his chest. And we see his spine come back together. All practical for the most part, which I love this movie for doing. All the Cenobites, a lot of it. Obviously, there's CGI enhancements, which is what CGI should be used for. I'm not anti-CGI, but use it where it's useful, don't rely on it. There's a lot of really good practicals in here, though, man. And that I've seen behind-the-scenes footage of them putting that Voight healing thing together, and oh my god, it's incredible. His spine comes back to form, and his fucking guts and his innards and his nerves. See his skin weld back together. It's like, oh my god. But then, as soon as that happens, big old chain, whoom, comes right down to him. Just stabs him right through the chest. This guy can't catch a break with his fucking chest, man. Gets healed from one, then another fucking otherworldly hellish thing comes and just impales him. What are you gonna do? So he ends up getting lifted up to the heavens. Trevor is sucked down below the mansion, I guess, for more pain and pleasure. But yeah, man, we'll get to Voight and that fucking ending. Goes, oh my god. But Riley now is offered her prize. We see what happened to fucking Voight. So she... Alright, I'm here now, I guess. Did not mean to do that. Anyways, so Riley now, it's her turn for her little gift. And she ends up choosing, hey, I don't want anything. Because she does have the opportunity to bring back her brother. Her brother even, her brother. We don't know if the Cenobites are manipulating her or not, but she kind of realizes, alright, my brother's dead. I have to accept that. I don't want fucking anything from you. And they comply. They're like, okay, you got it. And they fucking leave her alone. And really, really crazy stuff there. And they say, you're going to live a life of regret. Really, really, really well done stuff there. And yeah, man, we get the ending scene, the very end. Obviously, her and Colin, who should very much so be fucking dead. But they fucking limp out of there, and we get Voight, man, and what has happened to Voight. And I love that when he's getting lifted up by that big chain, obviously the pinhead gives that iconic line, oh yes, we have such sights to show you. And that they do, man. He is lifted up into another plane of existence. We don't see it, but all of his hair has been completely stripped from his body, and he just looks down, and we even see his little peen, man. We see a little Voight peen there, and he ends up getting peeled like a motherfucker. His skin on his arm gets fucking peeled off, or at least part of it does. You see the skin on his inner thigh, and then basically his fucking dick gets obliterated. And I love the detail. You don't see it, but where his cock and balls used to be, there's just a little lock, like you see on Pinhead's. You see two on Pinhead's neck. There's one on his crotch area, because he was seeking pleasure. Obviously that is the center for male pleasure, so of course that's gonna be gone. It's the ultimate fucking punishment. But yeah, and then easily the most brutal part of it, though, you see the skin on the fucking legs get filleted off, but you see his mouth on either side just go rip, and you just get his teeth. His lips are completely gone, his cheeks, and it's just this strip of like no skin, and he's just like, ugh, and his eyes become all blacked out and shit, and his fucking hands go up in that crucifix pose, and we get that pan out, and then bam, Hellraiser. I'm like, whoa. So I'm expecting to see a Voight Cenobite in the next Hellraiser movie. I would love to get Riley back. Hopefully we do. But yeah, man, I know we kind of went a little bit in plot rundown. Not super detailed, but did it a little more than I like. But hey, it is what it is. Overall, man, I fucking really enjoyed this movie, dude. What a fucking killer Hellraiser movie. Like I said, very different, but very familiar at the same time. But nonetheless, I absolutely loved it. So much so that my my chair couldn't take the weight of the excitement and had the capsized on me. But anyways, that'll do it for the review portion of the video. But you know what we gotta do now, baby? We gotta get into the blood, the guts, and the gory bits. I don't know what that was. There you go. We gotta get into my kill of the film. Stick around. I am always sure to go into a remake or a reboot of any popular franchise with bated breath. I don't know what I'm gonna get, but overall I was extremely impressed with Hellraiser. And one of the things I was super impressed with was the fucking brutality. Oh my god. This fucking movie, I admire it for not being a complete splatterfest, because none of the Hellraiser movies really are, at least from the ones that I've seen. They're bloody, don't get me wrong, they're fucking disgusting, but it's all done in a very artistic way, if that makes any sense. As artistic as blood and guts can be. And this one is no different. I really, really, really liked the brutality in this. We talked about Trevor, obviously, most notably the arm just getting completely filleted. It's like, ugh. Lots of really good kills in this, man. That being said, there are some that are off screen, which is a bit of a bummer. I expect to see a little something with each kill. We get one lady, Voight's old assistant, who just gets a little needle in her mouth. They just place it in her mouth. And then the rest is off screen. We don't really know what happens to her. Same with Matt, which the Matt character, that's a very, very integral character to the story. And I would have liked a little more punch to be packed with his death. We do get, she does get a vision of him while she's in the mansion. And she hugs him, and we see in the mirror that he's a very Frank-esque figure, which leads me to believe that he got skinned. Which I'm like, yeah, I would have liked to fucking see that, dude. Come on. But hey, it is what it is. Other than that, though, man, we get some really, really good brutality in this. Obviously, it's not a kill, but Voight's Cenobite conversion, I thought was really, really well done. I loved the Chatterer getting ripped apart by the chains. All in all, just a lot of cool stuff. But I have to give it to Nora's death in the van. Obviously, when she gets impaled by the puzzle box, you know she is pretty well fucked. But it takes time, and obviously you get very woozy and like, and so they're in the van trying to drive off, getting her to the hospital, and she's all fucked up. And it's the first time, we've seen the Cenobites kind of manipulate still like buildings and stuff, but a moving van, and she looks out the window and the trees are all red, and it's like blood fucking red, and we start to see the van like elongate into this like concrete corridor, and it's like this concrete hallway, you can say, and you're just like, oh shit. And then sure enough, she gets two in the fucking legs, one in the back, one in the chest, and she's just like, she's lifted up into this like arch position, which is just absolutely fucking brutal. And then yeah, man, that's our first real look. I mean, we get looks at Pinhead before, but this is our first real scene with her. And yeah, man, she fucking goes to town on this girl. I love the whole, obviously, what is it that you pray for? And she takes one of the pins out of her head, and the human body is capable of feeling so much more. And we get, as she screams, she just places that pin right through her throat. Not in anything that's going to kill her, but just goes right through the neck, all the way out to the other side. We get a great shot of the inside of her neck. Just absolutely brutal shit, man. Takes it out. And then, obviously she gets pulled apart, and her entire back is just pulled out, like out of her body, like her entire back, and you just see her ribs and her spine. It's not like crazy gory. They don't show a whole lot of the aftermath, but yeah, man, you just see her back just fly off, and very briefly you see all that bone and the innards and all that shit, and you're like, oh my god. And of course that shows in the van as well, which leads them to crashing. Just absolutely killer shit, man. And it is my kill of the film. Did not expect this to be a long one, but it is what it is. For those of you who have stuck around, thank you very much. Really, really enjoyed this one. And yeah, man. Next week on Days of Darkness, we are going to be getting into one of the craziest fucking horror sequels of all time. And that is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. So I'm really, really looking forward to revisiting that one, that crazy fucking movie. But until then, guys, thank you as always for coming and supporting the channel. Thank you very much for supporting the dream. And yeah, man, take care of each other, take care of yourselves, and keep watching horror. All right, guys, have a good day.